Nigeria will be marking the Democracy Day on Friday, the 12th of June. June the 12th is remarkable as a day the election adjudged the freest and fairest in Nigeria was conducted, but was later annulled by the military government. TVC News' Uzonna Onoye came up close and personal with the former editor of National Concord Newspapers, Dele Alake, who was a close aide to Chief MKO Abiola, winner of that presidential election. We're bringing the second part of that interview.
He ran for that election just like you prophesied, quote and unquote, that he may win but wouldn't be declared winner formally. Then it happened. And then 1 year after, Ekpetedo declaration took place, and that began a chain of reactions, actions and reactions in the nation's polity. What was your thought, about that declaration and then what follows?
The actions and reactions in the polity actually started before Ekpe declaration. Ekpe declaration was on June 11, 1994. I was a participant observer there. It was June 11, 1994. But the build up to that actually also created its own actions and reactions within the polity. And these actions and reactions really began with the suspension of the announcement of results on June 16th, 1993. And when it was quite obvious to everybody that MKO was coasting home to victory, some of my colleagues and I were with him that very day when the suspension, but that's a whole lot of different things. But the reactions and actions actually in the larger polity started from June 16th with the suspension, and then subsequently to June 23rd when the entire thing was cancelled, the elections were formally cancelled, and we started. There was an instant reaction of resistance. People poured on the streets, protesting, demonstrating, and expressing disgust with the action of the military then. And I remembered we started all kinds of operations, covert and overt, to press home the point that we would not take it and enough was enough. And the preparations culminated in the July 5, 6, 7 riots in Lagos, which also spread to other parts of Nigeria to press home for the revalidation of the election results. And that also led subsequently to the closure of my office, the Concord, by the military. That's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. But the nation, from that moment of the annulment, began to feel the paroxysms, the shaking. It was as if it was cataclysmic. It was something unheard of, unseen before, that someone will win an election so obviously, so openly, and it will be aborted. So the nation plunged into crisis from that moment. And there were a series of dimensions of the crisis that cascaded into June 11 of 1994 that resulted in the Ekpetedo declaration.
At that point, you were right in the middle of it, and visibly too. Mm-hmm. What level of exposure, or was your life in danger at any moment, you yourself, personally, and other colleagues of yours who were involved in the struggle at that time?
Generally, journalists had been in danger in Nigeria throughout the military regime. In fact, when, unlike these days now, if you became an editor during the military and you had not been invited for questioning by the security agencies, you had not been detained, arrested, harassed in any form, it was a common aphorism with us then that you had not cut your editorial teeth. You are not worthy of that editorial chair or the editor's chair if you had not faced one or multiple of these harassment. So it was a constant thing that we lived with. In fact, at that time, most of us who were editors were constant. Don't forget that there was no no Congress, no National Assembly, no State Assembly, nothing. So the press naturally became the bulwark of the people against the military, became the voice, became the parliament to aggregate opinions and views of the public to the authorities and back and forth. And automatically, we also had to reflect the disenchantment that was really palpable there in the public. So these things pitched us quite inexorably against the military. So we were always on the front line, on the firing line. So by the time June 12 crisis came, we were used to it anyway, and a few of us who were in the vortex of the entire June 12 saga went beyond the bounds of ordinary journalism.
Okay, that's actually where I wanted to go to, because it appears you got deep into activism.
Oh, yes.
So would it be right to think at that time, to be a journalist, you have to have some elements of activism in you, and carrying out your function as an editor would come with that demand or responsibility as a leader in that area of activism?
You are quite correct, but this did not apply to every editor.
Okay.
You see, because there's also individual differences theory. There's individual preferences, political views, and dispositions. But a few of us who had that activism in us, we called it active journalism. We were drawn into the crisis, and we plunged ourselves into the crisis, and we were carrying out lots of operations, all geared towards pressing home the point that this election result should be revalidated. Of course, the politicians outside, the political class, who were also enamored of the idea of revalidation of June 12, naturally teamed up with us. And they found in us willing operatives. And don't forget that even the political class could not achieve much without
the media.
The media.
Exactly.
So we provided that assistance, as it were.
Okay,
and we did that all through.
I'll keep referring to you as someone who knew MKO Abiola beyond the surface. The MKO Abiola's wife, Simbiat Abiola, died before all of this. Tell us, if she was alive, will she have allowed Chief Abiola to run for that office in 1993?
Well, it's quite hypothetical now. And it was actually one of the points that I mentioned to the chief that December night he called me to appraise me with his desire. I mentioned that because Alhaja Simbi, his first wife, had just been buried. So it was as if, the air of mourning and all of that
was still in the air.
Was still pervasive. So I mentioned that. And this same point that you raised. And he said, Alhaja was his wife, was his companion, was his everything. He started his life's journey with her. And that Alhaja, personally, as a woman who would want to protect or be overprotective of her husband, might not like him to run. But that if he insisted that Alhaja, who had always cooperated and supported him in all his ventures, will eventually support him. And that actually disarmed me.
The understanding from his perspective was that even if she was alive then, she may object, but if he insists,
she would support him.
Okay, good. Now, after Simbiat, Kudirat stepped in that image of Abiola's wife, and continued the struggle even when the chief himself was incarcerated. But within this month of June again, Kudirat was killed. Several years down the line, nobody has been convicted of that crime. Do you at any point remember that period, and what kind of feeling does it bring to your mind?
I remember vividly even the day she was killed, June of '96. My feeling then, of course, my heart sank. Immediately we heard of the killing, of the shooting, and she was taken to a co-hospital. We all rushed there, but of course she had given up. And I felt a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that if any regime will go this low to assassinate a woman who was seemingly harmless, other than the rhetorics that she spewed out in the media, particularly the radio, and then she spoke Hausa very fluently, so she was very constant on the BBC, VOA, the Northern Service, and all that. But beyond that, she was totally harmless. I knew her very closely, and she didn't strike me as anybody who could constitute a mortal danger to the life of that regime at that time. So I felt it must have been done to send a signal to the rest of us agitating that if they could go for that seemingly harmless woman, then nobody was safe, which we all knew before anyway, but that did not deter anybody.
All right, that was Dele Alake, a former editor at the National Concord Newspaper, speaking on the philosophy and struggle of late MKO Abiola. His clamor, that's late MKO Abiola's clamor for a return to democracy in 1999.